Welcome to Le Weekend, the bonus extended podcast episode for France News Brief. In case you missed one of our dailies, we've put together a convenient way to catch up on the stories from the past week in France, plus additional content about something related to culture, art, history, or current events at the end. If you enjoyed our daily updates, you'll find everything you need right here in a seamless recap of the week's most important headlines. Perfect for those who want to catch up in just one episode, Le Weekend is designed to keep you informed and engaged with a lighter touch at the end. Let's dive in. The news we covered on Monday. French Prime Minister François Bayrou said on Monday that he will seek a confidence vote from Parliament on September 8th as he seeks to mobilize support for his unpopular government's budget, as reported by Reuters. France has summoned the U.S. ambassador over anti-Semitism allegations. A spokesperson for the French Foreign Ministry said that American Ambassador Charles Kushner was summoned after he wrote a letter to President Emmanuel Macron alleging France had failed to do enough to stem anti-Semitic violence, as reported by Reuters. A French consumer advocate group sounded the alarm on cadmium levels in chocolate. An investigation has revealed that popular cocoa-based products in France may contribute more than expected to daily exposure to cadmium, a metal that builds up in the body over time and can increase the risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer, as reported by RFI. Judges upheld a French mayor's ban on panhandling despite protests from advocacy groups. Over the past year, the mayor of Noir in central France issued 3 decrees to combat public order disturbances. After the administrative court overturned the first 2, judges upheld the third, as reported by Le Monde. The United States suspended a license for a French vaccine after reports of serious side effects. American health authorities suspended the license for the Ixchuk vaccine by Valneva Labs against a mosquito-spread virus after new cases of adverse reactions, mainly among elderly patients, as reported by Le Monde. Residents of the Montmartre district in Paris are protesting against soaring visitor numbers, warning that over-tourism is eroding daily life in the historic neighborhood. Overall, the French capital welcomed just under 50 million tourists last year, a 2% rise from 2023. That dwarfs its permanent population of just over 2 million, with Sacré-Cœur being the country's most visited monument in 2024, as reported by RFI. The news we covered on Tuesday. French bonds tumbled after the Prime Minister called a confidence vote for September 8th. French government bond yields jumped to their highest since March, and the premium investors required to hold French debt rather than German bonds widened sharply after the announcement, as reported by Reuters. Jean-Luc Mélenchon, leader of the Insoumis party, announced the filing of a new impeachment proceeding against Emmanuel Macron. Mélenchon said President Macron must go if Prime Minister François Bayrou does not gain the confidence vote at the National Assembly on September 8th, as reported by BFM. France returned 3 colonial-era human skulls to Madagascar. On Tuesday, the country returned 3 colonial-era skulls held in a Paris museum to Madagascar 128 years after they were taken to France, including one believed to be that of Malagasy king killed by French troops, as reported by Le Monde. Faced with multiple attacks against entrepreneurs, the Ministry of Finance published a decree stating that business leaders will be able to request that their personal addresses remain confidential. The measure is in response in particular to concerns from the cryptocurrency industry, several of whose main players have been victims of kidnappings, as reported by Le Figaro. The news we covered on Wednesday. French officials found a fifth body in the River Seine outside of Paris. The local prosecutor's office said authorities fished the body of a man out of the river near the area on the outskirts of Paris where 4 other bodies were found earlier this month, as reported by Reuters. A decision on the Franco-German fighter jet project is said to come by year-end. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said he has agreed with President Emmanuel Macron to take a decision on the future of the Franco-German fighter jet program FCAS by the end of the year, as reported by Reuters. Earlier this week, Reuters reported that French industry was blocking entry into the next phase in the development by demanding sole leadership of the project. The city of Paris extended the River Seine swimming season as turnout nears 100,000 people since the July opening. One side, just steps away from the Eiffel Tower, will remain open until September 7th, and the largest bathing area located in the city's Bercy neighborhood will welcome swimmers until September 14th. A third near the Ile Saint-Louis Island will close on August 31st as originally planned, as reported by Le Monde. French doctors can now prescribe anti-obesity drugs. France's Medicine Safety Agency has decided to broaden access to Wegovy and Mounjaro, which are not reimbursed by the French National Health Insurance, and to lower the obesity threshold required for a prescription, as reported by Le Monde. The news we covered on Thursday. France's finance minister sees no risk of financial crisis despite political woes. Finance Minister Éric Lombard made the statement today, seeking to reassure investors even as the government faces likely defeat in a confidence vote next month, as reported by Reuters. Prime Minister François Bayrou will meet the heads of political parties and parliamentary groups before a September 8th confidence vote that could bring down his government. Speaking in a televised interview on Wednesday, Bayrou said that everyone must first agree on the importance of the effort to cut France's debt, as reported by RFI. On the eve of the new school year in France, more than 2,000 children are sleeping on the streets. According to a UNICEF survey, around 2,159 children live on the streets. With the new school year just days away, the president of UNICEF France has denounced a lack of firm political will to put an end to this unacceptable situation, as reported by France 24. The number of job seekers registered in July with France Travail in category A, that is, without any activity, increased by 1.8% compared to the previous month, according to data published on Wednesday by the Statistical Service of the Ministry of Labour, as reported by Le Figaro. The Office of the Prime Minister announced that French state-owned utility EDF will make 6 gigawatts of hydroelectric capacity available to third parties under an agreement with the European Commission. France has faced criticism from the Commission for more than a decade about its hydroelectric concessions, notably over its failure to reopen expired concessions to competition and the dominant position of EDF, as reported by Reuters. The news we covered on Friday. Russia said President Macron crossed the line of decency by calling Putin an ogre. Russia said on Friday that French President Emmanuel Macron had spoken in a manner unbecoming of a head of state when he called Russian President Vladimir Putin an ogre at our gates, as reported by Reuters. France's economy grew slightly in the second quarter, according to final data from Statistics Office ANSEE, confirming the preliminary reading of 0.3% that showed the Eurozone's second largest economy gaining momentum, as reported by France Info. Trade unions called for a day of strikes and labor action on September 18th against the 2026 budget proposal. The trade unions are therefore calling for a rally 8 days after the Blanc movement set for September 10th, with which they are not directly associated, as reported by BFM. In related news, the majority union of French air traffic controllers announced a new strike on September 18th, citing a failure of social dialogue, according to a statement seen by AFP. Several days of strikes by air traffic controllers have already severely disrupted air traffic in recent months at the request of various trade union organizations, as reported by Le Figaro. President Macron vowed to serve out his mandate amid the budget crisis. The French president added that Prime Minister François Bayrou was not facing an insurmountable challenge and called on political players to find ways to agree on his proposed budget ahead of the September 8th confidence vote, which could topple his government, as reported by Le Monde. Towns in rural northeast France have been forced to give up tap water after record levels of toxic forever chemicals or PFAS were found. For the past 6 months, 3,500 people in around 20 towns across the Meuse and Ardennes department have had to rely on bottled water for drinking and cooking, as reported by RFI. You are listening to Le Weekend. Now that you're all caught up with the key headlines from the past week, it's time for a special bonus story. This is where we take a closer look at one of our most compelling topics, adding fresh insights with a lighter touch. For this bonus story on Le Weekend, we look at the anniversary of the liberation of Paris. Every year towards the end of August, Paris starts to wake up from the summer slumber. The city's attention also turns to a series of solemn ceremonies. The dates August 19th to the 25th mark the anniversary of the liberation of Paris from Nazi occupation in 1944. The city is filled with wreath-laying ceremonies, the last gatherings of aging resistant veterans, and the constant unspoken question that this anniversary always raises. Who truly liberated Paris, and what parts of France's past remain too uncomfortable to fully remember? This living history hits the very nerve of the nation's identity, a story of heroes, collaborators, and a complex truth that France is still grappling with today. To understand the weight of this week, we must first step back into the suffocating atmosphere of Paris in the summer of 1944. The city was occupied. It was humiliated. Swastikas hung from the Grand Palais, German signage flanked the boulevards, and the daily life of Parisians was a tense ballet of scarcity and fear. For 4 long years, the spirit of the city had been suppressed. But by August 1944, the air was electric with a new sound, the distant thunder of Allied guns drawing closer since the D-Day landings in June. The occupying forces were on the defensive and everybody knew it. The question was not if, but how Paris would be freed. Would it be liberated from the outside by the advancing armies, or would it rise up and liberate itself from within? This tension between external salvation and internal uprising is where the true complicated story begins. The spark was lit by a rebellion of the ordinary, everyday Parisians. On the morning of August 19, 1944, members of the French resistance, the Force Française de l'Intérieur, or FFI, and police officers who had finally thrown off their allegiance to Vichy, began to occupy the Préfecture de Police on Ile de la Cité. It was not a carefully orchestrated military plan, it was a daring, chaotic gamble. From that moment, the city erupted into a spontaneous insurrection. Barricades built from overturned cars, cobblestones pried from the very streets, and furniture held from windows sprang up across the arrondissement. Printers and journalists seized the offices of the collaborationist press and began printing leaflets calling for a general uprising. This was the People's War, a street-by-street, house-by-house fight, fought by men and women with little more than pistols, Molotov cocktails, and an immense pent-up courage. And yet this heroic narrative immediately clashes with a more complicated geopolitical reality. The leader of the Free French, Charles de Gaulle, and the Allied High Command, led by General Dwight Eisenhower, were watching this uprising with anxiety. For Eisenhower, Paris was a strategic nightmare. A drawn-out urban battle would result in catastrophic civilian casualties, drain precious fuel and manpower needed for the push toward Germany, and potentially see the Allies bogged down in a siege while the enemy regrouped. His plan was to bypass Paris entirely. For de Gaulle, the calculus was different but equally urgent. He understood that a city liberated by its own people would be a powerful political entity. If the communist-led resistant factions secured victory alone, they could establish a revolutionary government that would challenge his own provisional authority. France risked trading a Nazi occupation for a civil war. De Gaulle needed the Allies, and specifically the French 2nd Armored Division under General Leclerc, to enter Paris to legitimize his government and control the narrative of the liberation. So while Parisians fought and died on the barricades, a high-stakes drama was playing out in command tents far from the city. De Gaulle pressured and threatened Eisenhower, insisting that if the Allies did not act, he would order Leclerc's division to advance on Paris himself. Faced with this insubordination and the escalating violence in the city, Eisenhower reluctantly agreed. The order was given. The French tanks would roll in. This decision created the dual mythos of the liberation, the popular uprising of the people, and the triumphant arrival of the military saviors. But which one was truly decisive? The truth is, they were inextricably linked. The courage of the Résistance forced the hand of the generals. Without the uprising, the Allies may have bypassed the city for weeks, leading to an even grimmer outcome. And without Leclerc's forces, the fighting would have dragged on, resulting in far greater bloodshed. The iconic image of de Gaulle striding down the Champs-Élysées on August 26, a sea of ecstatic Parisians cheering him, was the carefully staged culmination of this effort. It was the moment he reclaimed Paris, not just from the Nazis, but for the French Republic he sought to lead. He presented a unified story. France, represented by him and his forces, had liberated itself. For the next few decades, the official French narrative, cemented by de Gaulle, actively suppressed the uncomfortable memory of Vichy. The story was that a handful of traitors had betrayed France, but the real France, the eternal France, had been represented by the resistance and de Gaulle in London. It was a powerful and comforting story. It wasn't until 1995 that a French president, Jacques Chirac, stood before the nation and formally acknowledged the truth. He stated that the French state had been responsible for the deportation of the Jews, that it had committed the irreparable. This speech was a second liberation, a liberation from the narrative. It allowed France to finally begin a more honest and therefore more painful conversation with its own past. And so, when we see the old veterans gathering this week, their faces lined with memory, we are witnessing a commemoration of a military event, but also the struggle over memory itself. The memorial plaques on street corners that mark where resistance fell are not just historical markers, they are arguments in stone insisting that this version of events be remembered. The ceremonies are a conscious act of defining French identity, built both on triumphant action but also on the intensely human truths of courage and compromise. This annual act of remembrance is therefore not about freezing the past in a metal frame. It is a dialogue between then and now. The debates that began on the barricades in 1944 are still with us. What is the duty of a citizen? What is the meaning of the Republic? How does a nation balance the need for unity with the duty of truth? The liberation of Paris didn't have a neat ending. It was a chaotic and painful beginning. It closed one chapter of terror and opened another of reckoning that continues to this day in the heart of a city that vows to honor its imperfect memory. To learn more about this chapter in history, a visit to the Museum of the Liberation of Paris, Musée du Général Leclerc, Musée Jean Moulin, is highly recommended. Located in the 14th arrondissement, this beautifully restored museum is housed in an 18th century pavilion just above the former underground command post of the Paris resistance, where Colonel Rolh Tanguy coordinated the uprising in August 1944. The museum offers an immersive experience with extensive exhibits on the occupation, the resistance, and the dramatic events leading to the liberation of Paris. Visitors can explore artifacts, documents, and multimedia displays that bring to life the courage and determination of those who fought to free the city and the nation. Entry to the permanent collection is free, making it an essential stop for anyone wanting to deepen their understanding of Paris's heroic journey from occupation to liberation. Thank you for listening to Le Weekend, your one-stop destination for everything we covered this past week in France. Catch our daily France News Brief roundups of the main news in France every weekday, wherever you get your podcasts. Stay informed.